New York lost 137,586 residents to other states in 2025. That's not a guess. That's the Census Bureau's latest population estimates, covering July 2024 through July 2025. The state added just over 1,000 new residents total last year, one of the slowest growth rates in the entire country. Since 2020, the net outflow to other states has crossed 1 million people, second only to California. United Van Lines tracked 58% of all New York moves last year as outbound, ranking it the second most moved away from state in the country. Long Island's outbound rate hit 78%, the third highest in the entire United States. Florida is the #1 destination, then Texas, New Jersey, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. Cost of living, taxes, weather, crime, opportunity, the reasons stack up. But here's what most Exodus videos don't do. They lump the whole state together and leave it at that. We're going city by city, why people are leaving each one, where they're going instead, and whether the city actually deserves the reputation or if the data tells a different story. These are 10 New York cities people are leaving massively. And the last one on this list is the obvious one, but the way it's losing people now is different from anything in its history. Newburgh sits about 60 miles north of New York City on the west bank of the Hudson, population around 28,000. It looks like the kind of small city that should be thriving. Beautiful 19th century architecture, express bus service to the city, Metro North access via the Beacon station across the river, affordable housing. So why is it on this list? Because Newburgh is where the downstate exodus lands, and what happens after they land is the part nobody talks about. People come here because they got priced out of Westchester, out of Rockland, out of the Bronx. Median home prices are around $350,000, far cheaper than Westchester or anywhere closer to the city. Rents are manageable, but then they get there. Newburgh has been ranked one of the most dangerous small cities in America for years. The poverty rate sits above 25%. Drug trafficking corridors run straight through the city. Property crime is high. New residents stay a few years, do the math on commuting to NYC versus what they actually got, and a lot of them keep going. Some end up in Pennsylvania, some go further upstate, some go back closer to the city and just accept the rent. Newburgh is a city where affordable doesn't translate into livable for most people who arrive expecting it to. Syracuse is in central New York, with a population of about 145,000. The city has been on a long downward slide. Since 1950, it has shed more than 30% of its population. The story used to be simple. Manufacturing left. The General Electric jobs went away. The Carrier plant moved out. The young population followed. But there is a real twist coming. Micron officially broke ground on a $100 billion semiconductor megafab just outside Syracuse in January 2026, the largest single private investment in New York State history. On paper, this should be the comeback. In practice, the first phase isn't planned to be operational until the end of this decade, and the people leaving today aren't waiting around. Winters are brutal. Syracuse averages over 120 inches of snow a year, more than any other major U.S. city. Property taxes are among the highest in the country relative to home values. The downtown has improved, but the broader city has stretches that haven't seen real investment in decades. Where are people going? A lot to North Carolina, Florida, Texas. Some specifically to Charlotte and Raleigh. The Micron promise is real, but the city is losing the race against its own decline timeline. Utica is in the Mohawk Valley, about an hour east of Syracuse, population around 63,000. And Utica is one of the most interesting cities on this list because it's been quietly running a counter-experiment for 30 years. Utica became a major refugee resettlement city starting in the 1990s. People from Bosnia, Burma, Somalia, Vietnam. That immigration is the only reason the population didn't fall further. Without it, Utica would have lost half its residents by now. With it, the city has barely held steady. But the longtime residents are still leaving. Property crime rates put it in the top 10 most dangerous cities in New York. The chance of being a victim of property crime is roughly 1 in 36. Manufacturing jobs that used to anchor families are gone. Downtown is improving slowly, and slowly is the operative word. Where are people going? A lot moved to the suburbs of Albany, some to Florida, some to North Carolina. Utica is a city held together by new arrivals from far away, while the people who grew up there keep finding reasons to leave. It's a strange kind of stability, and it's not the kind that builds momentum. 4. Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls might be the most disappointing entry on this list, because it shouldn't be losing people. It's home to one of the most famous natural attractions on Earth. Niagara Falls State Park draws roughly 9.5 million visitors a year on the American side, with another 12 million crossing to the Canadian side. The city's own population is under 49,000, less than half its 1960 peak of 102,000. So what's happening? The tourism economy never extended past the immediate falls area. Walk a few blocks from the main attractions, and you're in neighborhoods with a 23.7% poverty rate, the highest in the entire region. Median home prices sit around $135,000, among the lowest of any city this size in the entire country, in a place famous worldwide. Unemployment runs above the regional average. Tourism creates seasonal, low-wage service jobs that don't sustain families. The city has been losing population since 1960, when its peak hit 102,000. Major chemical plants began closing in the 1970s as cheaper hydroelectric power lost its strategic edge, and the Love Canal disaster in 1978 cemented the city's reputation problem. The casino brought in some revenue, but didn't translate into broad-based growth. Crime spikes during peak tourist season. Where are people going? Across the border to Ontario for some, to Buffalo's stronger suburbs for others, out of state to Florida and the Carolinas. Niagara Falls has world-class scenery and small-town American problems sitting right next to each other. The mismatch between what it should be and what it is keeps pushing people out. Schenectady sits in the capital region, population around 68,000. The city used to call itself the city that lights and hauls the world because General Electric and the American Locomotive Company were both headquartered here. That world is gone. GE still has a presence, but it is a fraction of what it was. The locomotive plant closed in 1969. The population peaked at 95,000 in 1930 and has been falling ever since. What you're left with is a small, post-industrial city with above-average crime rates, high property taxes, and not enough new economic engine to replace the old one. The downtown has gotten genuinely better in the last decade. Proctor's Theater, the casino, some restaurant growth. But the residential neighborhoods tell a different story. Vacant homes, aging infrastructure, school systems under pressure. Where are people going? A lot stay in the capital region, but move to Saratoga County, which has been one of the few growth areas in upstate New York. Others head out of state to the usual suspects: Florida, North Carolina, Texas. Schenectady is a city living off the memory of an economy that is not coming back. Mount Vernon is in southern Westchester County, population around 72,000, and it sits right on the New York City border. On paper, this should be a desirable Westchester address. In practice, Mount Vernon has been struggling for decades with a problem that doesn't have an easy fix. The city is dense, has a small commercial tax base, sky-high property taxes, and one of the highest violent crime rates among Westchester suburbs. Public housing concentration in certain neighborhoods has created persistent challenges. The school system has had serious financial and academic problems for years. Mount Vernon is what happens when a Westchester address doesn't deliver Westchester quality of life. People who can afford to leave Mount Vernon move deeper into Westchester, to Yonkers, to White Plains, to New Rochelle, or out of the county entirely. Where are people going? Other parts of Westchester for the upwardly mobile, the Bronx for some, out of state for others. Mount Vernon is a city paying suburban taxes for urban problems, and the trade keeps not working out. Yonkers is the third largest city in New York State, population around 211,000, and it sits directly on top of the Bronx border. For decades, the pitch was simple, cheaper than NYC, but with the same train access. The pitch stopped working. Yonkers property taxes are among the highest in Westchester County. Median home prices have crossed $600,000. Apartment rents have climbed past $2,500 for a one-bedroom in better neighborhoods. The schools are mixed. The transit access is real, but the commute into Manhattan still runs 40 minutes plus, sometimes well over an hour during peak times. So you're paying nearly NYC prices for what residents describe as a glorified commuter suburb. That gap between what it costs and what it delivers is the same complaint that's driving the San Jose exodus on the other coast. And it has the same effect. Where are people going? Some move further up into Westchester. Some skip across the river to Bergen County, New Jersey, where taxes are lower. Some leave the metro entirely for Florida or the Carolinas. Yonkers isn't collapsing, but the value proposition that built it has worn thin. Rochester is the fourth largest city in New York, population around 209,000, and the Rochester story is the cleanest version of the upstate decline narrative. Kodak, Xerox, Bausch & Lomb, three companies that defined the city for a century. All three contracted dramatically. Kodak filed for bankruptcy in 2012. The city has lost more than a third of its population since 1950. The people leaving Rochester now tend to be the ones the city can least afford to lose. Young adults with college degrees from the University of Rochester and RIT. They study here. They leave for somewhere with a bigger career ceiling. The local economy still has healthcare, the optics industry, some growing tech. But it doesn't generate enough opportunity to keep the next generation home. Quality of life issues compound the brain drain. Rochester winters are long. Property taxes are high. Crime rates per capita run above the state average. The cultural scene is solid but limited. Where are people going? A lot to North Carolina, Charlotte and Raleigh specifically. Some to Texas, some to Florida. Rochester loses its talent the way Fresno does, to cities that just offer more upside. Buffalo is the second largest city in New York, population around 274,000 in the city, with the broader metro area at about 1.16 million. And Buffalo is the headline story of upstate decline. The city has lost 55% of its population since 1950, one of the steepest drops of any major American city. The steel industry collapsed. Bethlehem Steel's Lackawanna plant, once one of the largest in the world, closed in the 1980s. Manufacturing more broadly has never recovered. But here's the thing people don't say enough. Buffalo is also one of the most genuinely improving cities on this list. The waterfront has been transformed in the last 15 years. Tech jobs are slowly moving in. The medical campus has grown into a real economic anchor. Snowstorms get the headlines, but the cost of living is among the lowest in the Northeast, and the metro population has actually ticked up slightly the last few years. The problem is that perception lags reality by years. When someone Googles Buffalo, the first results are about the Rust Belt and the snow, not the revival. Where are people going? Florida is the top destination. Texas, North Carolina, and Tennessee follow. Buffalo is a city quietly getting better while still losing the people it needs to grow faster. No surprise here. NYC leads the entire state in outbound migration, and it's not even close. The city lost a net 114,000 residents to other parts of the country in 2025 alone. Since April 2020, the city has lost more than 600,000 people on net. Pandemic-era peaks hit a net outflow of 330,000 in a single year. The reasons are the kind of thing anyone who's lived in New York already knows, but the numbers still hit. The average rent for a one-bedroom in New York City now runs above $4,000, with Manhattan one-bedrooms approaching $4,500. State income tax tops out at 10.9%, plus a city tax of 3.876% on top. Sales tax in the 5 boroughs is 8.875%. A $1 million home in Brooklyn isn't a luxury anymore. It's a starter property. What changed recently is who's leaving. In 2024 and 2025, more low and middle income residents left than high income ones. This isn't a tax flight story alone. It's a working class affordability story. People who used to make New York work are no longer making New York work. Where are people going? Florida is number one, with more than 70,000 New Yorkers making the move every year. New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, North Carolina, and Texas follow. The city isn't dying. International immigration kept the overall population from cratering until 2025. But the people who built daily life in New York keep finding it cheaper somewhere else, and that's a different kind of problem than tourist counts or finance jobs leaving. 10 cities, 10 different reasons, but one common thread. New York is losing people the way California is losing people, just with worse weather and longer history. Some of these cities deserve their reputation. Some are better than the headlines suggest. Buffalo is rebuilding. Syracuse has a real shot at a comeback. New York City is not going anywhere as a global city. But all of them are part of a migration story that has been accelerating, not slowing down. And the New Yorkers leaving today are not just retirees chasing Florida sunshine anymore. They are working families, young professionals, and small business owners doing the math and getting the same answer. If you have left one of these cities, drop a comment and tell me where you ended up and whether it was worth it. And if you are thinking about leaving, tell me which city. Maybe we can help you figure out where to go next.